talk about student loan management. And so this is Becca Diskin. She's our Director of Financial Aid here at Missouri Southern. So you guys may have interacted with her, probably if not her, at least her office at some point this semester. So I asked Becca if she'd be willing to come and talk about student loans and managing them and financial decisions. So she has a presentation for us today, and I think we'll have plenty of time for you guys to ask questions if you have questions. So anything you guys want to know about financial aid, hopefully we can get that out and talk about that today. So, okay.
Thanks, Dory. Thanks all of you for being here today. I would assume many of you probably have interacted with the financial aid office in some capacity at this point. If not, you probably will before your time at Southern is over. Most students at Southern have some type of financial aid helping them get through college, whether it be grants or loans or student employment or scholarships or veterans benefits or lots of other outside funding that could exist out there. So most of the time students do end up having to work with financial aid in some capacity before they finish, or at least to ask questions. So I'm here today mainly to talk about student loans and managing your money wisely, but I definitely am available for any other types of questions that come up in the conversation too. So I'm here to serve you guys and want you to feel that you can leave here today a little bit more knowledgeable about the student loan process, about the student loans that are available to you, the pitfalls of borrowing. And so the presentation I have to kind of liven it up a little bit is something that we use with our university experience classes a lot in talking about financial aid and safe borrowing or borrowing smartly. But I think this was very relevant for you all too. It's not a real entry-level type discussion. It's more something that's applicable to anyone that either has student loans or realizes that they have student loans available to them. So we've addressed this in a kind of a light way, even though the information can be kind of heavy and pretty specific. So we've geared it on a treasure hunt theme. So if you bear with me as I click through here. A couple of things that we're going to start out with is thinking about yourself on a path of getting to where you want to be. Many of you may not realize that the financial aid process is complex. There's lots of rules, there's lots of regulations, there's lots of details that go involved in it, and so you need a lot of tools to make sure that you navigate the process well. And so in the theme of the treasure hunt, we want you to make sure you have the proper tools to get through the treasure, to get to the treasure at the end. So you need an eyeglass or something to navigate, making sure that you understand what's in front of you. You need something to keep track, so something to take notes on, or a computer or something to log what you are doing so that you don't forget important deadlines, or you're making sure you're taking care of all the things that are coming up. Of course, we'll put you on a little map here to show you what the dangers are and what ultimately the treasure is. Ultimately, in my opinion, your job here is to do as well as you can in school, get a degree so you can get a better job, make good money, and ultimately pay your loans back. That's really kind of the full circle of everything in a nutshell. So the desire for you all have declared majors at this point in time, is making sure that you're successful in getting to that end goal, which is the degree, which gets you on farther, on life's path. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where we're headed today. When you think about, and I apologize, this is going to be kind of slow. I'm trying not to rush it. Our office consists of 12 full-time staff and 5 to 6 student workers at any given time. And we work to serve about 6,000 students on average each year that fill out a financial aid application. We actually receive over 12,000 FAFSA applications every year that process through our office because of corrections and because of students who are maybe not sure where they want to go, and all of those things that happen at the middle of the year when somebody transfers to us late or vice versa. So there's a lot of information that comes into our office and a lot of different details, and each one of you probably has a very different financial aid profile if we would look at each situation differently. So I'm going to talk in kind of general terms, but giving you some tips and some tools to help you navigate the process as well as you can. Given our limitations, we are a staff of limited people. There's many of you, so it is a give and take to make sure that you guys are doing everything you need to be doing so that we can be doing everything we can to help you get your money quickly and correctly and accurately, and ultimately to serve whatever needs you have to make sure the end goal is met. So Don't be afraid to ask questions. Most of you probably already know that we are in 109 Hearns Hall. You can reach us by email at any time. We have a financial aid email box that you can email anytime. We always have someone working that. Our phone conversations are always available if you need to call us and ask a specific question. And you also have,
Do you want that off so we can
turn it off if you want.
too dark?
that's okay with me, if
Okay.
you guys are okay with that. The colors are kind of deep on there, so is that okay for the lighting there? Okay. So thinking along the lines of reaching out for help, sometimes we don't know you're struggling with something or you have a question about something particular unless you bring it to us. We do a lot of mass communications. We send emails, we make phone calls, we send postcards through the mail and letters, notifications and things like that. But if you have specific needs or things that happen throughout the year, we don't know those things are going on unless you address them with us. So please know that we are available. Each one of you is assigned a financial aid counselor that actually processes your financial aid and is available for specific kinds of questions. If you have a job loss in your household during the middle of the year and that changes your financial situation. If someone gets sick and is not able to continue classes, all of those different kinds of things that happens, don't be afraid to reach out and let us know. That's the only way we're going to be able to serve you best is to know what's going on. So reach out and know that we're available to help you. So first of all, how many of you know that you have a student loan debt right now? And of the ones that do you know how much it is? You don't have to tell me. I'm not asking you to reveal anything you're not comfortable with, but do you know how much in total it is? It's really easy for students to sign on that dotted line or click. We do everything online. You accept online that click, without realizing that semester after semester, year after year, that's adding up. And so this is part of that, is that awareness of realizing that what you're doing is going to come due later. And it's important for you to understand that you're borrowing only what you need, not just because it's there. And it is going to be there, waiting for you to repay it at some point. Fortunately, with federal student loans, you don't have to make payments on them until 6 months after you graduate or withdraw from school, whichever comes first. And in the case of a Perkins loan, it's 9 months after you graduate. So you do have a grace period to get yourself squared away and get through school and get settled in a new job before you have to make your payments. But it can be a very rude awakening for students that have just out of sight, out of mind, borrowed for 4 years or so, and then when it all adds up, it's kind of a sticker shock. And we do have some people that end up crying, once they get their final loan bill, because those 4 years are done. They can't go back and change that. But looking back, they probably wish they would have budgeted things a little differently, or maybe not, big eyes thinking, oh yeah, those dollars are going to be great right now. I need every bit of it. But do you really need it? Because it is going to be there for you eventually. So it's important to realize kind of where you're at. And there's a lot of different tools that you can utilize to find out how much you've borrowed. Of course, LionNet is a great resource for you to see your Missouri Southern totals. There is a national student loan database that I'll show you at the end of the presentation that you can go out and see all of your student loan history. So if you've transferred from another school or you have a variety of loans and you're not sure what's what, you can go out and look at any time and take a look at that. So from the Stafford loan, most of what I'm talking about here, when I say student loans, I'm talking about the federal Stafford loan program, also called the direct loan program. It's the same thing. It's a federal loan that's available to you because you're a student here. The federal government loans us money to give on to you, and then they have loan servicers hired that will work to collect those monies from you whenever you get out of school and enter repayment. So those loans are very mandated by the Department of Education. We don't get to pick who we give them to. There's a series of eligibility criteria. You have to fill out a FAFSA to get one. And the dollar amounts that you are limited to are set by the federal government. So those amounts are $5,500 for the first year as a freshman dependent student and $9,500 as an independent student. And dependent and independent we'll talk about in just a minute. The other thing about those dollar amounts is that's one academic year. So fall, spring, summer being one academic year here at Missouri Southern. So that $5,500 as a freshman is available to you. Typically we award it half for fall, half for spring. But if you don't take the full amount fall and spring, you could have some left over to help out with summer. Not every student goes to summer school, so it's always kind of a trailer. It's an option that's out there waiting for you if you decide to go to summer school. But most of the time when we award your financial aid, it's based on a fall spring academic year, and summer's just kind of added on at the end. Does that make sense? So that kind of gives you just a baseline to start with as far as borrowing. Of course, you don't have to take that much. It's up to that amount. And then as you progress through college and complete more credit hours, you become a sophomore or a junior or senior status, and those loan amounts go up. Okay, so each year you can borrow more and more based on your grade level progressing. Okay, so we talked a little bit about dependent and independent. That is a financial aid term that is determined by your FAFSA application. So there's a series of 7 questions on the FAFSA that you answer yes or no to, and if you can answer yes to any one of those up there, then you are considered an independent student. If they are all no, then you're considered a dependent student for financial aid purposes, and you're required to use your parental tax information as well as your own for that FAFSA year. So each academic year when you fill out a FAFSA, it's asking you, are you 24? Are you a veteran? Are you married? Do you have children that you support? Are you homeless or at risk of being homeless? Are you an orphan ward of the court or a graduate student working on a master's or professional degree? So that's how the Department of Education determines dependent and independent. There is a little 1% window of exception that we have for people who don't meet any of those criteria. But the Department of Education is very clear. It has to be in situations that are very extreme. Some of the ones that I see are when one parent isn't even known to the student, they don't even know who that parent is, and the other one's incarcerated. Or something really unfortunate that prevents them from being supported by those parents and having access to their tax information. Or in a situation maybe where it's unsafe for the student to go to mom or dad and say, I need this information. And of course, there's a whole bunch of documentation we have to collect in order to prove that. But by and large, those 7 things is what determines dependency status for the FAFSA. So that determines then how much loan money we can give you based on the dependent or independent dollar figures. Okay? Any questions about that part of it? If you borrow the maximum amount available to you each academic year, so $5,500 as a freshman dependent student, $6,500 the next year, $7,500 the next year as a junior, and then $7,500 again as a senior, you will realize $27,000 in debt just like that. 4 years goes by real quick, and then you're sitting with $27,000 in debt. That's a lot of money that accumulates very quickly because you're getting it in smaller increments at a time. If you're in school for 4 years as an independent student and you borrow the maximum available to you each year, that $9,500, then $10,500, then $12,500 for the last 2 years, then you reach your $45,000. So that's why I say we do have students sometimes that end up in our office shocked at how much they've borrowed, because in aggregate it does accumulate really quickly if you're not paying attention. We do have students that change majors, or they double major, or they're doing something that takes a little bit longer to finish their degree. I know sometimes music education majors, music in general sometimes takes a little bit longer because it requires so many credit hours, and other types of programs may extend into 5 or 6 years to finish your degree. You're still eligible for student loans at that senior level for another year, but that again adds up to your aggregate limit of loan debt being higher and higher. So 5 years at the maximum, you're going to hit $31,000 and $57,500. The problem with those two numbers is this is the absolute maximum that the Department of Education will lend you at the undergraduate level. So once you've hit the $57,500 as an independent student, you don't get any more loan money. Whether you have your degree or not, you're done. Okay, that's capped out.
Just going to say, so it's not based on 5 years, it's based on the cap amount.
Yes, for federal student loans, it's based on the aggregate loan limit. So you're limited each year how much you can borrow, and then you're limited in totality how much you can borrow. So some students, maybe they have a rough first 2 years, and they have to retake some classes, or they've withdrawn, and so they have to start over. Those loan amounts are still on the books, and that still adds into their aggregate. So there are some students who need 5 or 6 years to finish. They borrowed for all of it along the way, but had to retake some classes or replace some bad grades or some withdrawn classes, and those dollars still add up in, and they'll find themselves at their maximum. So not all the time, it's not common here at Southern, but it does happen. We also have students that transfer from other schools, maybe a private school or a for-profit school that cost a lot more. They've utilized a lot more of their aggregate limit early on, and then when they come to Southern, those loan dollars still have to be factored into the aggregate limit, and if they get close to their limit, then we're not able to lend to them anymore as well.
If you have already paid back some of it, does the limit go down?
It does. Yep, so if you're making payments while you're in school, which is an option, not a requirement, you will keep that down, and then you could continue to borrow up against that aggregate. Yeah, good question. So it's important to stay on track and try to pass as many classes as you can each semester, avoid withdrawals, avoid fails whenever you can, because those dollars are still being accumulated into your totals.
I have a question about the 6 months after you get out of school, you start paying on those. What if you drop out of school for a little while and then you go back? Do you stop paying on those, or do you continue to keep paying on those?
You can
ones?
put them back in school status when you return. So say you're in school a couple of years and then you sit out a year. Your 6-month grace period would have been realized, so that last 6 months of that year, you'd start making payments, and then you go back to school again after the 3rd year. You can put your loans back in school status. We run reports from the registrar's office that send to a clearinghouse that notifies all the loan servicers what our enrollment is for our students. So anytime you have to be 6 hours, you have to be at least half-time status to qualify to go back in school status again. So if you would come back at least half-time status, we would report to the clearinghouse, which just then feed up to all the loan servicers saying you're back in school again. That'll put your loans in school status, and you wouldn't have to make payments for that time period. So as long as you would consistently stay enrolled at least 6 hours going forward, your loans would stay in school status and you wouldn't have to make payments.
So I know that, as you mentioned, there is the 6 months after you graduate to start making payments. If we are going directly from undergraduate to graduate school, do we make payments during graduate school, or is it at the end of graduate school once you graduate?
End of graduate school.
Okay.
You could stay in school status for that period of time that you're working on a master's or medical degree or whatever else you're working on. Yeah, and again, 6 hours of enrollment would be required. So a lot of students will get their bachelor's degree, get a full-time job, and then work on their master's maybe part-time. That happens a lot. You would have to be at least 6 hours to put those loans in school deferment status. Otherwise, if you're just taking one class here or there and it's only 3 credit hours, you'd still be making payments as you go. The other thing to mention about the 6-month grace period is you only get that 6-month grace period one time for that loan. So in your situation, say you went to school for 2 years, you laid out a year, you used that 6-month grace period, and then you came back to school after the 3rd year was over, you wouldn't have to make payments again until after you graduated, the 2nd time around, but you wouldn't get a 6-month grace period on those first 2 years' loans. You would go into repayment as soon as your enrollment period ended. So if you graduated in May, your first payment would be due in June or July, depending on when the servicer notified you. Usually it's about 30 to 60 days from the time your loan enrollment period ends. Now, in that scenario, when you came back to school and you borrowed, say, your 3rd and 4th year, those loans are brand new, so they would have a 6-month grace period then. You would only be making payments on those earlier ones right away. Does that make sense?
I was ready to bring it. Thank you very much.
So your 6-month grace period is specific to those loans.
Okay.
Because we process loans on an academic year cycle, they're dispersed on a semester basis. So those loans are their own entity. Even though you're paying them back all in one chunk, or your total is your total and that's what your payment is, those loans would come due first from the first 2 years because you've already used your 6-month grace period on them. Your other ones wouldn't start coming due until the later until that next 6 months lapsed. Does that make sense? So it's really confusing, and it's really hard sometimes for students to understand what their payments are really going to be in that kind of scenario, and that's why we have a default prevention counselor in our office that is here to help you even after you leave Southern. We'll help you go through that, help you know what your repayment options are, because there's about 7 different repayment plans available, and to navigate through all of that with your loan servicer. So don't forget that even after you've left here, there's still resources to help you navigate through that process. We're still here to help you. Okay, so let's kind of jump back a little bit. If you look at the maximum, and hopefully none of you are borrowing the max every year, but if you are, that $27,000, which is 4 years of taking the maximum, would be a $311 monthly payment for 10 years. So 120 monthly payments is what you would be set with to begin with. If you borrowed the top end, $57,500, $662 a month for 10 years. It's a house payment, guys. And you're probably gonna have a house payment, and you're probably gonna have a car payment, and you've probably got other things you wanna do once you graduate from college that are gonna improve your lifestyle. So keep all that in mind as you're borrowing now so that you're not taking any more than you absolutely have to, so that that loan debt can be as small as absolutely possible. I realize many of you are gonna graduate from here with loan debt. I didn't get through college without loan debt. It's a fact of life. Most people need it to finish school. That's okay. I'm not here to say that you shouldn't borrow at all. I'm just saying be sensible about it and know what you're borrowing, why you're borrowing, and that you're spending it on the things you should be. It's not a, free-for-all shopping spree every time you get your refund check, because it's easy to get, but it's going to be a lot harder to face whenever you have the payments come and due.
So this is just a projective of if you pay off all your loans in 10 years. You can go 20 years, you can go income-based.
Right. Yes. I mentioned there are 7 different repayment plans. Yes, there's income-based repayment, there's graduated repayment, there's extended repayment, where the standard, if you went into graduation, realized your 6-month grace period, and the loan company started billing you after those 6 months and said, here's your payment, they're going to set you up on a 10-year standard repayment if you did nothing. If you talk to them and explain to them, hey, I'm only making $25,000 right out of college, I can't find the job I really want, I'm not able to afford these payments, they can put you on a different repayment plan, one which is income-based, where it's looking at your annual income and it's making your payments a limited amount of your disposable income. So some people, of course it will take you longer to repay it than 10 years if they put you on a different repayment plan, but your monthly amount would be much more manageable in that case. So there's interest-only payments for a while in certain repayment plans, where a couple of years you're making interest-only payments, and then it grows a little bit, so it gives you time to, establish yourself, maybe get a better job, get a raise, those kinds of things. Graduated income sensitive, income-based, extended, which allows you to pay on it for 20 years instead of 10. Of course, you're going to pay more interest over that time, but it certainly makes your monthly payment a lower amount. So those are all the kinds of things that are available to you. The federal loan programs all have that built into them. So that's not something that you might be denied and you might be approved for. It's something you are allowed within the loan itself. So there's a lot of perks to borrowing a federal student loan because those protections are built into it. Kind of like the in-school deferment. If you go back to school 6 hours at a time, you don't have to make payments again. Those are all built in, not things that you have to request and they only approve so many or something. It's based on your qualifying event.
Sounds like a cheaty question. I'm not really thinking of doing it, but what if you took 6 hours for the rest of your life? Would you ever have to pay it?
Well, that's a good question. We do have probably some people that have tried that. It does happen. There are other types of rules in the financial aid world that eventually will catch up to them. Eligibility type rules that you cannot receive financial aid, whether you hit your maximum or not, longer than 150% of the time it would take you to finish the degree. So eventually their time would run out. Not necessarily time, it's not based on semesters, it's more based on how many hours have you accumulated. And you can't be just taking random courses to get federal aid, you have to be degree seeking and your classes have to be towards that degree. So if you were just taking swimming and basket weaving and aerobics and randomly, eventually that would catch up to you because you'd either accumulate so many hours that you'd be cut off, or you wouldn't be progressing towards your degree and the school would be monitoring that and saying, you're not taking classes applicable, we're not going to give you aid anymore. So there are other rules that end up coming into that. Now, not to say there probably haven't been students that have done that before, because you can get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and go on to med school and then maybe go to law school, and there's 30 years right there. So it is possible, but there's other stipulations that would probably interfere with their ability to just keep doing it forever. On the flip side of that, Pell Grants have a 600% limit. So I know that's very different than we're talking about student loans. But students who are eligible for federal Pell Grant, it's very limited. You only get it for 600%, which is basically the equivalent of I think the best way to explain it is 6 years worth of aid. You know, if you were full-time fall, full-time spring, that's 100%, and you only get 600%. So it doesn't always equate that way if you're not a full-time student. You would get longer than that, but and Pell Grant's a little different because not everybody gets the same amount. So it's not based on an aggregate amount like loans are. It's not a dollar figure. It's based on that percentage. So there's lots of other little things that the Department of Education has built in to protect the integrity of the money that they're giving out. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, this might be a weird question, but like the person who took out the loan becomes deceased, who has to pay that back?
Nobody.
Nobody?
The federal government writes it off. So one thing about federal loans is when you die, your loans die with you. Now your family may have to provide them with a death certificate to make that happen, but that is exactly what happens. Consumer debt isn't always that way. You know, secured debt with a home or a car, things that isn't always that way. Usually someone else still has to account for that. But federal student loans are a very individual loan, personal to you. If it's a parent plus loan, it's the parent taking it out on behalf of the student. So if either one of them dies, then there's some leeway there. So that's another thing that's built into the rules of the loan. It's a good question though. I mean, it's not an easy one to talk about all the time, but it's reality.
So when you go into private loans, that's when they actually do go after having the repayment from a family member, right?
Yeah, a private student loan is different than the federal Stafford loans I've been talking about here. A private loan is from an outside lender like Sallie Mae or Discover or Wells Fargo. They're like a bank, and they have based that loan based on your credit score and maybe a cosigner. And those loans are more like an unsecured loan from a bank. So it's still designed for students who are in college. You know, they're an education-related loan. They don't have all the same protections that federal student loans do. Yeah, those typically require a cosigner, so there's usually two parties involved paying those back.
So if you reach the max here, do the private loans no longer recognize you as a potential?
No, you would still be eligible. If you hit your maximums here, the private loans are still available to you. And private loans are available in some cases to students who are less than full-time or less than half-time. You know, so the ones that are just taking one class here or one class there, the private student loans are, I mean, if you meet all their credit requirements, they would lend you money for that tuition in a different way. There's different criteria for those loans altogether, and each bank is going to have its own set of rules. So it's much more variable, a little less protected, you know, because you don't have all the federal perks built into them, but they're similar. Yeah, and most of our students here don't utilize alternative loans, but they are out there and they are available, and we do process them for students. I mean, usually we try to help them understand why the federal loans are a better option, and usually our costs are low enough here at Southern that we can mitigate everything that they need to take care of with the federal loan programs. But that's not always the case. Some folks do have alternative loans, and we process them every semester as well. It's just not as large of a population. Okay, so we talked about payment amounts. A couple things, I guess, as far as important tips to remember. In being a wise borrower is, of course, we talked a little bit about staying on the academic path. Looking at a degree evaluation for yourself, knowing what the catalog says your course requirements are, and sticking to that plan. You know, chart out what general education requirements you need first. What do you need to take this class? What prerequisites do you have for this class? So that you don't find yourself at the end taking a really important class, but it still needs something else to build on it as a prerequisite, and you're left taking it your last summer after you're supposed to have graduated in May or something like that. You know, so planning ahead, and I think Project Stay probably does a good job helping you enroll from an advising standpoint to help keep you on track. So you guys have a little extra support there that's probably very beneficial to stay academically in the right place. Summer classes are always an option. In order to do that, we encourage students to take a look at the summer schedule. If there's something else you can add, you know, even if it's just 1 or 2 classes, that can help you stay on track and make sure you can finish within 4 years. Especially if you've dropped a class, you know, in the past here or there, can help you pick up those extras and make sure that you're staying on track. And financial aid is available in the summer, but the rules are a little different and it's not always the same amount. And some students have already maxed out in the fall and spring and don't have eligibility for summer. So I usually tell students, if you're thinking about summer school, come talk to us in March so that you have plenty of time to plan and make payments if you need to for summer. Utilize your spring money that you just got not too long ago to help last, through those summer terms if you don't have as much available to you. And we will start processing summer financial aid in March as well. So if you're interested in summer, we have a one-page summer application that lets us know that you're interested in summer, and then we'll be able to educate you on what's available to you, and you can plan from there what you want to enroll in.
What's the latest you can do or get into that for summer classes? Like, you don't know in March that you're going to be able to do summer classes.
You can enroll up until pretty much school starts in June. We will have some classes this summer that start right after spring ends, like May 20th, but the majority of classes will start June 1st or 2nd.
So we could wait until like June if we, or
You
even
could.
into May if we decide.
You could, and the schedules will come out, I think, probably April. I know they're working on them internally now, but if you wanted to just start in April, at least planning out what you might be interested in taking, go ahead and fill out a summer aid application. At least we can get it set up. If you end up not going, it's no big deal. It'd be better to plan ahead and not go through with it than to wait till the last minute and say, oh, I need financial aid, oh, I need to enroll. Oh, those things are harder to navigate through at the last minute than if you at least do it and then, nope, I decide it's not going to work for me, I'm going to take it off the table. That's a lot easier to undo rather than having the stress of at the last minute it's due, because summer's just a tight window. It's an 8-week term. The due dates are the same week you enroll. Class starts on Monday and fees are due that Thursday. You don't get the same turnaround. Financial aid is the second week instead of the third week. Everything is much more condensed. Plus your coursework is too. You're doing 16 weeks like a regular semester coursework in 8 weeks of class, and in some cases 4 weeks of class. Some of those summer terms are just June or just July. So you do really have to make a decision as to whether you want to commit to summer or not, because it's just different. It's all the way around different. But it's sometimes a great way to knock out a couple of classes, or especially something that you struggle with and you just want to focus on that one class, really intensive, get it done and out of the way. We have a lot of students that do it that way too. A couple of other tips, of course, we talked about withdrawing and failing classes can have an impact on you not finishing in 4 years, but from the financial aid side, it also has an impact on your future financial aid eligibility. We require students to maintain at least a 70% pass rate and a 2.0 GPA at bare minimum. So if you're constantly taking classes and withdrawing from them or failing them, eventually your pass rate is going to start dropping. If you take 12 hours a semester and you pass all 12, and that's your first semester here, you're 100% pass rate. So you have a little room to drop or, maybe not do so well but if you do that consistently, that pass rate is going to continue to drop. And once it falls below 70, then you're in jeopardy of losing your financial aid eligibility. And that includes loans, that includes grants, that includes scholarships, and that includes working on campus through federal work study. So there are